This is Gemara Avodah Zarah Daf Samach Vav, and we're holding the top line. Samach Vav and Aleph. We would like all the learning to continue being an incredible schos for Shalema, for Gavriel, Simcha, ben Miriam, Ahuva, B'siyata de Shemaya, the incredible, unestimable Koyach HaTorah should bring the ultimate refuah Shalema, B'siyata de Shemaya. We're holding the top line of Samach Vav and Aleph. And we're about to take a deep dive into the dinim of bittul of yayin nesach. We saw in the Mishnah a chiluk between bittul bin noisin. Between bittul if something mixes b'minoi or b'she'enoi minoi. That if it mixes b'minoi, it makes it aser very quickly, and if it mixes b'she'enoi minoi, then it's only bin noisin tam. Says the Gemara, what makes it minoi and what makes it einoi minoi? Says the Gemara, chamratika b'invei divrei kol b'noisin tam. If we have aged wine with grapes, everyone agrees that it only will make it aser if it gives it tam, like einoi minoi. Chamra chadata b'invi, but if it's new wine in grapes, abai amar b'mashu, like the din of minoi. The Rava Amar b'noisin tam, like the din of einoi minoi. As the top Rashi points out, what is the difference between chamra atika and chamra chadasha? Taimoi nikar be'anovim, whether you could taste the tam. Abai Amar b'mashu, why basar taim mazlinan? We go after the tam. We go after the taste. If they have the same taste, then it's called a minoi, and that's why it's going to be aser, even with the smallest bit. I divide the tam, they both have the same tam, and therefore, and that line really is the premise of the first part of today's entire shir, is that min b'minoi asers b'mashu, says Abaye, chamra chadita, new wine is the same taste, and therefore it's b'mashu. But Rava Amar 6 lines down, b'noisin tam. Why? Basa Shema Azlina, we go after the name of the item. And each one has its own name. One is called Chamra Chadata, one is called Chamra. And this really, as you can anticipate, is an incredible fundamental machlekes. How do we consider things minoi and sheinoi minoi? Does it go after the way the Welt, the world, coins and calls the item, or does it go after the physical taste that the item has? Asks the Gemara, Kashan Abaye. Abaye says it goes after the taste. Tanan, we learned in the Mishnah, and what do we see in the Mishnah? That when the grapes were cracked, it is aser, because what do we think right now? It's new grapes with new wine, in grapes. And therefore it sounds like it's only because it gives off tam. Kashan Abaye. Says Gemara, why are you assuming that? Loi b'mashu. Says Gemara, 1 second. The classical kasha. Look at the end of the Mishnah. Amadiktani seifa zakal kol shebehana asoi b'noisin tan aser kol shein ban asoi b'noisin tan muter. The seifa gives us a cloud regarding whether the flavor is to one's benefit or not. Mechlal to b'noisin tan maskinan. And therefore, what would that infer? What would that teach us? That what is the Mishnah referring to? The Mishnah is referring to b'noisin tam, and therefore says the Gemara, asks the Gemara, that what do we see? We see that the end of the Mishnah is referring to b'noisin tam, and therefore the earlier part of the Mishnah, when it says the wine is on the cracked grapes, would seemingly indicate that what? It's where it's as well b'noisin tam, and that's when it's going to be ulcer. Akasha Abaye, because Abaye says that it's ulcer already b'mashu. So answers the Gemara. How does Abaye explain the Mishnah? Abaye b'masnisa b'chamra atiki b'invi b'chamra atiki b'invi. Abaye learns no. The Mishnah is talking about old wine, aged wine, and therefore it's no kasha at all. Similarly, says the Gemara, the same machlekes Abaye and Rava, chala de chamra, wine vinegar, v'chala de shechra, and beer vinegar that mixed together. V'chamra dechiti v'chama disoiri, or wheat wine with barley wine, wheat leaven with barley leaven. Abaya Amar b'noisin tam, basar taimaz linon, and Nacham, the exact same yisoid. All is about taste. And therefore, v'hai taim alachod, each one has its own taste. Who cares that they're both called shechra? Who cares that they're both called chamra? And therefore, min b'sheina emino, min b'sheina emino, goes b'noisin tam. Rav Amar no b'mashu, why basar shmaz linon? Lamaisa, they have different names. V'chala mikri, v'chamra mikri, v'chamra mikri. Excuse me, they both have the same name, not like Abai. Abai, they have different tastes. Rava said, you're right, but they're both wine, they're both vinegar, and therefore 7 lines for the wide lines. Another application of this machlokes, Abaya and Rava. Says Abaya, I'll bring you a raya. Amar Abaye. Says Abaye, where do I know this from? The time we learned in a brayso. Tavlin shnai mushe loisha shemois vehein min echad oy min gimel asurin oy min gimel. If we have tavlinim, spices, shnai mushleisha shemois, 2 or 3 different types of names, but they're all one min, or shleisha minim, or min shleisha, or 3 different minim, asurin umitzarfim, and they all fall into a food and they give the food taste. So even though each one on its own you don't really taste, but together it gives tam to the dish, therefore it's mitzaref and it asters up the food. And on this, Va'amar Chizkiah comes on Chizkiah and he comments, Hacha b'mina matika askina, about a sweet taste. Hoyel v'ruyin l'matik ben hazakadeira, since it's fit on the last narrow line to sweeten the pot. So says the Gemara, explains Abaye, says Abaye, according to me, that all has to do with the taste. It's all one taste. Each spice has its own name. So says Abaye, so right to me, which by default is what? A kasha on Rava. Rava Amar L'cha Mani Rabbi Meir. He says, Rava, no, this is Shitas Rabbi Meir Titania. Rabbi Yehuda Mishem Rabbi Meir. Menayin L'chol Yisur Shabbat Torah. Shem Esarvin says, Rabbi Meir has a Shita that he says that the fact that it has a Shem Isser, the fact that it is Usser, that is the reason why it is Mitzaref. He learns it from a pasuk, Shem Lo Yisechal Kol Ta'eva. Kol Shetiavti L'cha. Anything that is tiavti l'cha, that is disgusting to you, that is ulcer, includes in Baal Teichal, and that is Rameir's Chiddush, that it will all be mitzaref. And that is the reason why, in this case, says Rava, these are cases of minim that are all ulcer, and that's why it's not a kasha on Rava. Says the Gemara, more cases that will be applicable to this machlekes Abaye and Rava. 2 lines from the bottom. Chala, vinegar, legoy chamra, into wine. Divrei kol b'neisin tam. Everyone agrees that they're called 2 minim. Therefore, it also do with the taste. Chamra legoy chala, wine into vinegar. Abaye amar b'mashu, Rava amar b'neisin tam. Now we have the same machlekes. Why? Abaye amar b'mashu. Abaye says it will answer even with the smallest amount. As we turn over to Samach Vav Mebeis, explains Abaye, you know why? Because what is vinegar, says Abaye? Says Abaye, Rechaya Chala. Because if you have something that smells like vinegar, V'taima Chamra, and tastes like wine, as vinegar is spoiled wine, Chala is considered vinegar. And therefore, says Abaye, Bavle min b'mina v'chom min b'mashu. As you look at the top Rashi for a quick moment, Rechaya Chala, its scent is vinegar. Yain says Samachli Ruvay Haya Rechaya Chala. It smelled like chala, vinegar. But Taima Chamra tastes like wine. Ubasa Recha Zin, we go by the smell. Which is Arvu Havle Min B'mina, he says Abaye. The Rava Amar in the second line of Sam Vav Beis. Benoise in Tam. Why? Rechaya Chala v'Tamra Chamra. If it smells like vinegar but tastes like wine, says Rava Chamra. It's called wine, and therefore what? That's why Rava will disagree. Says the Gemara. 1 second, now we brought the rechaya, the smell. Hi bas tia. If you smell wine through bas tia, it's they would have a barrel of wine and they would make a hole in the stopper. You have to smell the wine to know what level of wine, the quality, and whether it's spoiled or not. Akom b'di Yisrael. A guy to smell the wine of a Yid is fine. Yisrael. Excuse me. Shaber dami. That is fine. Yisrael. B'da'akom. But for a Yid to smell the wine of a guy, Abaye Amar Aser v'Rava Amar Mutter. Abaye going to say it's Aser. Why is Abaye going to say it's Aser? Abaye Amar Aser Recha Milsahi. Just like Abaye just taught us a moment ago, that what? That when it smells like challah, it gets a din of challah, it gets a din of vinegar. It says Abaye is smelling something significant. Therefore, it's Aser to smell wine of Avodah Zarah. Rav Amar Mutter Recha Lav Milsahi. Amar Rav Amar Minallah. It comes like Rav, and Rav says, where do I know? But the Recha D'Loiklumu, the Recha is nothing. The Tanan. We learned in a Mishnah, Tanur Sheisiku Bikamoin Shel Chuma. You have an oven that was fired up with cumin of Chuma. Of Avaboy's Abbas, and bread was baked in it. Abbas Muteres. Why? Fishain Tam Kamon. Because the tam of the common of the cumin doesn't actually go into the oven, but rather Ela Recha Kuma. It's only the Recha, says Rava, that is insignificant. Abaye says, it's a good raya. We know I respond in the last narrow line. Shiny awesome. Temikli isura. Says Abaye, that case is different. You know why? Because the truma has been burnt up. It's no longer here. That's why it won't aser up the oven. Says the Gemara, and this we're going to conclude. Amar Av Mari Kitanoi. This machlekes of the Amoraim, Abaye, and Rava has already been debated by Tanoim. It's already been in a Mishnah in Shumais. As the first wide line teaches, Haroide pas chama, Haroide pas chama. Someone removes hot bread from an oven, Vinasna, and places it al bichava shel yayin Shuma on a barrel of wine of Truma. Rameir Oiser, Rav Yehuda Matir. Rav Yesi Matir b'shal chitin v'oiser b'shal s'irin. Why? Neshes iron sheyaves. You know why? Says Rav Yesi, because barley draws in the reicha, the smell of wine. You see that Rav Yesi goes bust to the reicha. Says the Gemara, what's the machlekes? Ma'alabaka mifli, the maris of reicha milsi, or maris of reicha la milsi. Rav Meir holds reicha is milsa, and Rav Yehuda holds it's not. Says the Gemara, you're right. Reicha lo klamu. The Rava, 2 lines to the bottom, Vade tonight, you're right, it's machlekes tonight. But Abaye, you know, he can respond. Milim tonight, it's not a kasha me. Amilcha Abaye, lav me etmar Allah. Did we not learn Amar Rabba Barachana, Amar Reish Lakish, Bebas Chama, V'chavis Pesucha? It's only referring to hot bread in an open cask of wine. Then, Divrei Akol, as we turn over to Samach Zayin Amid Aleph, wrapping up the teretz of Abaye, how Abaye could respond and say that it's not a machlekes Tanayim. Of course, much better that we don't have Abaye and Rava arguing about that which Tanayim argued about. Says Abaye Divrei Akol Asura. B'pasei neves chavetz migufa. If it's cold bread in a quart cast, Divrei Akol muteres. So what's the machlekes? Loinechu al b'pas chama v'chavetz migufa. Hot bread in an open cast. B'pas seinenes. Excuse me. And a closed cask. Or B'pas seinenes, cold bread, v'chavetz psucha, v'hadi de nami. And Abaye is going to say that my case, the case that he spoke about Abbas Tia of the recha going through, is going to be the same thing. It's k'pas chama, v'chavetz psucha dami, and that's the reason why Divrei Akol would be asura, because the recha will come out. Therefore, Abaye is explaining that his din fits perfectly with both Rabbi Meir and Rabbi Yehuda with all Tanoim. We'll pick it up from the 2 dots. B'siyata dishmai.